While Russian and Chinese presidents were advancing their no-limits friendship in Moscow, the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida was expressing solidarity with the Ukrainians in Kiev. Today was one of those rare days when the world was presented with split-screen optics of Asian rivals in the capitals of two warring nations. While Putin held a grand welcome for the Chinese president at the Kremlin, the Japanese Prime Minister was seen on the streets of the Ukrainian capital. In fact, he visited Bucha, where Russia is accused to have committed horrific war crimes. Kishida also paid his respects to the Ukrainian soldiers killed in the war. Apart from the incredible optics, all eyes were naturally fixated on Moscow, desperately awaiting the takeaways of the Xi-Putin talks. The two friends met again today after informal talks on Monday. Xi's visit to Moscow is aimed at cementing the two countries' no-limits partnership. President Putin hailed Russia's growing trade, energy and political ties with China.
尊敬的普京总统，我再次感谢你邀请我访问俄罗斯。在双方共同努力下，中俄关系始终保持蓬勃、健康、稳定的发展势头。两国政治互信，利益交融，民心相通，不断深化。经贸、投资、能源、人文、地方等领域的合作持续推进。
Putin described the talks as successful and constructive. The Russian president also said Moscow was ready to help Chinese businesses replace Western firms that have left Russia over the Ukraine conflict. Putin said Moscow is ready to increase oil exports to Beijing.
Российский бизнес в состоянии удовлетворить растущий спрос со стороны китайской экономики в энергоносителях, как в рамках текущих проектов, так и тех, что сейчас находятся в процессе согласования. Готовы поддержать китайский бизнес в вопросе замещения производств покинувших Россию западных предприятий.
The Chinese president said China and Russia should work more closely to push forward greater practical cooperation. The two leaders also signed a series of documents on strategic cooperation. The meeting also reaffirmed the fact that now China is clearly Russia's most important economic partner. After the talks, Putin said Russia, China and Mongolia have completed all agreements on a planned power of Siberia 2 pipeline. The pipeline will ship Russian gas to China. The planned power of Siberia 2 pipeline would deliver 50 billion cubic meters. The presidents also addressed the elephant in the room, the war in Ukraine. While Putin seems accepting of China's proposals for a peace plan, the Russian president underlined that Kiev was not willing to implement key provisions of this peace proposal. Sitting beside the Chinese president, Putin called out the West once again, saying the West will continue to fuel the war until the last Ukrainian. For more on this, we are now joined by Elizabeth Laris, an adjunct fellow at the Pacific Forum and president of E. Laris Consulting. Thanks very much for joining us here on WION. Firstly, the interesting images that we've seen today of Xi holding talks with Putin in Moscow and at the same time the Japanese Prime Minister in Bucha in Ukraine. A lot is being said about those juxtaposed images. I wonder what your thoughts on that are. Also, a lot of talk about how Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin are trying to cement, or shall we say take forward, this so-called no-limits partnership. What do you think it really means in today's geopolitics?
Well, the compare and contrast between Xi in a very peaceful setting in Moscow and Kishida in a war zone is really striking. What Kishida, as Prime Minister of Japan, is signaling is that he is behind the West. That is, he is, of course, against the Russian invasion of Ukraine, a sovereign independent nation state, and he has thrown his lot with the West. This is not a big surprise. Japan, of course, has been trending toward the West. Matter of fact, it is somewhat considered to be a Western country located in East Asia. And so it's not a surprise that he would, support Ukraine and the West. He's also burnishing his credentials as a peacemaker, as opposed to Xi Jinping, who has gone to Russia as a peacemaker. Of course, China and Japan have had tremendous differences throughout history. They have differences now. China claims some territory that Japan also claims. So there's a very large rivalry there. And so Kishida is making his day to go and enhance that rivalry to indicate, I'm throwing my lot with the correct people here in history. Regarding the unlimited, no limits cooperation between China and Russia, Xi Jinping is going to be very careful there. If you listen to his comments, he talks about cooperation in trade, investment, and energy. He is not talking about military cooperation. Matter of fact, China has no military alliances, not even with North Korea. And so he is saying we want to cooperate with Russia. He is playing a neutral party in the Russia-Ukraine war, and he comes as a peacemaker right off his peacemaking attempts between Iran and Saudi Arabia just a couple of weeks ago. So he's burnishing his credentials as a peacemaker. He's supporting Russia because he cannot afford Russia to lose in the war now that China's really thrown its lot with Russia. And also he is seeking with Russia to knock the U.S. off its pedestal as the world's dominant influencer.
All right. And finally, before we let you go, Putin has said that even though he welcomes China's so-called peace proposal, as far as the Ukraine war is concerned, Kiev is certainly not interested. The question is, do you really believe China can act as an honest broker? How do you perceive China's role in the Ukraine war?
Well, if you look at the wording of the peace proposal, it's pretty boilerplate. That is, we seek peace between the two sides, a mutual, agreeable, peaceful solution, that kind of thing. But Ukraine is not going to bite because it's lost, its eastern flank against Russia. Like, why would it agree to a peace proposal where it's lost territory to the aggressor? Of course, Russia is going to support this because then it gets rewarded for invading a sovereign independent nation state. And so Xi Jinping might not get a lot of credibility for pulling off a peaceful agreement because it's not probably going to happen. But in China and for the countries that support China, he burnishes credentials as a mediator. For example, well, I tried. It's not my fault that it didn't work out. I tried and we must keep trying.
All right. Elizabeth Laris, great to have you on WION. Thank you for sharing your perspective with us on that crucial summit.
You're welcome.